Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Aisha's had type 1 diabetes for over 30 years. Today, we're going to talk about how she came out to the people around her that didn't understand diabetes. She's going to tell a couple of glucagon stories, talk about Afrezza, and how doctors never provided her the basic help that she needed. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes. But everybody is welcome. Type 1, type 2, gestational, loved ones, it doesn't matter to me. If you're impacted by diabetes and you're looking for support, comfort, or community, check out Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes on Facebook. Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, a company that's bringing together caregivers and parents of children with type 1 diabetes. Later in this episode, I'll be speaking with Stacy, a mom of a 12-year-old daughter with type 1. Her experience is an all too familiar one. After losing a lot of weight and drinking more water than was considered normal, Avery was diagnosed. Stacy and her family were suddenly thrown into managing diabetes without any medical background, and Stacy had a chronic condition of her own to manage. The Medtronic Champions community really supported them during this uncertain and overwhelming time. Thanks to Medtronic, Stacy and Avery found the support they needed. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox.
Hello, my name is Aisha.
Aisha, like that?
Yeah, Aisha, yeah.
I got it. Okay. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm fine, but I talk about this all the time. So are you nervous?
I am very nervous. I'm going to try to not to get too giddy and excited here, but I am so excited to be here today.
Okay. Well, tell me why.
A while back, you had done a series and you'd asked for people to come on and share their stories about glucagon.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of touched home for me because I've been type 1 for 32, 33 years, and no one ever talks about glucagon. They give you a prescription, but that they never really tell you anything about it.
Yeah. So you've heard some of the stories that people have come on and told?
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, Arden's story was very similar to one of mine that I had in July of 22. That was super scary and hard and incredibly frightening. But it really kind of opened up my eyes to like the need of having glucagon available and kind of bringing the people around you to know more about it.
What happened to you back then?
It's interesting that we talk about there is no such thing as brittle diabetes, but I think my entire life I've dealt with so many hormonal changes and different insulin needs. And back in July, I had gone to sleep just like any other day. During the night, my sugar must have dipped low. And when I woke up, I knew I was low and I was trying to reach for something, for anything. I had always slept with juice boxes by my bed, and at that time I had Gvoke by my bed.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what happened for the next several hours was I just kept coming in and out of consciousness and trying to get two brain cells together to figure out how to inject the Gvoke. And finally I did. That worked really well. I will say that worked. I was able to come back around about 15 minutes later. The interesting thing about it was like I was off for the whole day. Couldn't really come out of the fog all day long. I had a wedding to attend that day and I still went, but I was like kind of in a fog. I didn't know that you're supposed to eat after you inject with Gvoke. I thought it was kind of like, or any kind of glucagon, that you just do it and then you come back around and you just go on with your day.
Can I ask a couple questions? Let me
Yeah.
ask. So
Please.
you fall asleep, you're okay when you fall asleep. At some point while you're sleeping, you wake up with the realization that you're low. Do you actually get to juice or food or anything? No, you just kind of drift in and out of it at that point.
Yeah. And it was as if I had to will my body to reach for everything, to it took everything just to reach up to the dresser to grab what was there. And that was probably the lowest ever that I had ever been. And I live alone is the other thing. I probably should have provided a lot more intro to the story instead of diving in.
No.
I live alone, and I've lived alone for 20 years, and I've always been able to manage my type 1. And in the early years, just to go back a little bit, when we go back to the traditional glucagon kits with the needle and everything, you were always so afraid to use them. Afraid because of the mixing and how would you be able to do that. And then also, they always would have stories about how difficult it was afterwards and how terrible you would feel if you used the glucagon. So that kind of always, I think, for me, kept me from using it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, at least with the Gvoke, it was a lot easier to administer it eventually.
You had Gvoke HypoPen, so you just pulled the cap off and clicked it, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It took a little bit because, again, the state that I was in was very severe. It was probably the worst.
From the first time you were like, I'm low, until you finally figured out how to get your hands on Gvoke, how long do you think that was? Did you say hours?
Hours.
How do you know that when you look back? If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information.
Because it took me most of the morning. I literally remember in stages to the point of finally getting the Gvoke in my hand and literally being on the floor of my bedroom, trying to figure out how I was going to do this. And then I would not go to sleep, but basically be out of it for a little while. And then it was very interesting that I was able to keep coming out of it a little bit, but just enough to be able to kind of get to the next step.
Yeah. Did you have a CGM at that point?
Oh, yes. Yes. CGMs are wonderful. I love my CGM. But even with that, I'm also hard of hearing. So hearing the alarms go off, it's kind of two-sided. Sometimes we ignore the alarms so much because we're so used to hearing them go off all the time. And then there's times where you just don't simply hear it.
Yeah. Which
for me, it would be better to have it buzz than it would for it to vibrate than it would be for it to sound the alarm, because I don't hear that. I did remedy that recently by getting the Sugar Pixel, and that has a little vibrating pad that I can put under my pillow, and I love that.
You use the little puck that goes on the Sugar Pixel and it vibrates? That works for you?
Yeah. Yes, I love that.
Oh,
That
that's so
it
cool.
has worked beautifully.
Good. But you looked back, I imagine, after this incident. So you actually saw a period of time for hours where you were how low on the CGM?
Hmm. Yeah, it was pretty much all night.
6 hours?
Yeah, like literally, I would almost stretch it up to 8 hours because by the time I got up, it must have been about 10 o'clock in the morning.
No, I'm sorry. I guess what you're describing here is that maybe your liver was giving off something, right? And maybe bouncing you back up the tiniest bit. You'd be awake enough to think, I need something, then you couldn't do it. And then, you finally got Gvoke in your hand. You opened the package? You were able to open the package?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did open the package. I'm not exactly sure how I did that.
And you end up on the floor. Do you know how you end up on the floor?
No, I put myself there. It was because trying to move, like having mobility of any kind was really challenging. I remember, like I said, reaching up for the Gvoke, like literally every brain cell I had was trying to reach for the Gvoke and tell my arm to reach up. And it was as if I didn't have any control over my limbs. And it was really it really took focused intentionality to be able to do it.
In small windows where you were actually conscious enough to think about it.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah.
Were you wearing a pump or were you MDI at that point?
Yeah, I am. I've been looping since I think it's May of 2019 when Omnipod first went to loop.
So you are using a DIY system, and I assume during that entire 10 hours or however long that was, it wasn't giving you any insulin, right? It probably cut your basal completely off.
That would be back in 22. So I don't know if the algorithm had that functionality yet.
I would think it would. I would think do you know how low you were reading on your CGM?
I don't even think it was registering.
Yeah, I would imagine then.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's so much technology now that really does I've been sleeping for 20 years alone. So it's there's been times in my life where my insulin needs are incredibly great. And then other times where they're not as much. A lot of times it can be exercise. We know that impacts our insulin levels, but sometimes it can be just an infection is going on that I'm not aware of. And then all of a sudden that, changes my needs for that time.
Yeah. I guess we want to tell people at this point, I want it in your words, but how many people in your life know you have type 1 diabetes?
Very few. There's about a handful now of people in my whole world, but it's not very public. Most of the people where I work, I don't think anyone knows. I'm actually recording this at my office right now, and they do not know. I have a small handful of friends. And I think that comes from the fact that, when I first was diagnosed in the beginning, treatment was definitely different. You're dealing with R and L and rather Atlantis. And, we were doing MDI, and that took, 12 injections a day. And, we were covering all our meals. And I was very vocal at that time about it. And what ended up happening, though, was everywhere I went, people were telling me that I couldn't do things, that I couldn't jump out of a plane, that I couldn't fly a plane, that I couldn't, kind of good to do both, that I couldn't drive a motorcycle, that, you can't have this. And that was one of the things I remember always is that I would go out to eat with my friends and we'd order something after dinner and I'd order a cake or something and somebody would pull it away and say that you can't have that. And it just got to be that type 1 was becoming more of my world than I wanted it to be. Mm-hmm. And it was the first thing that people thought of when they saw me or spoke to me. So through the years, I just kind of
you wanted that to
stopped.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually you stop telling people about it, and then that just becomes the norm. So people you're related to obviously know, but
right
after that, handful of people.
Right. And I would say even the people that I'm related to, I don't think they know enough about type 1. My siblings, they know that I deal with this, but they don't really understand. No one really knows what it's like on a day to day. And I think that was something that, we deal with this every day, all day, constantly.
Right.
And it's not just 1 minute, one time a day you think about it. It's on my mind all day long. I'm trying to make sure that I'm okay, for this interview, trying to make sure when I get behind the wheel of a car that I'm okay,
Yeah.
with everything.
One way or the other, it's in your head.
Right. Always.
And you don't need other people bringing it up to you.
Right. And in fact, it was funny. I had shared it with somebody recently, and we were at an event. And right away, when he was introducing me to somebody else at the event, he was like, "Oh, here's Aisha, and she's a type 1 diabetic." And I was like, that wasn't really relevant to the conversation.
Had nothing to do with anything.
Worse. Right. It had
Yeah.
nothing to do with anything. And it was also like, it wasn't his story to tell. And I think that's where I get really passionate about it is, this is my story. This is my life. And if I choose to bring you into it and share it with you, that's my business. But it shouldn't be something that limits me or stops me from doing the things that I want to do in my world.
Right. I agree with you, but I have a question. Let's say that you met that person and you were at an event, and the three of you rode motorcycles. And the guy that you were with knew that, and you went up to the third person and said, "Hey, this is Aisha. She rides too." Would you have been okay with that, or would you say that's my story to tell?
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. I guess it would have been okay there because the people would ride motorcycles. And it is funny. They do say that about me, by the way. They do say, yes, this is Aisha who rides a motorcycle.
But you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Listen, I understand everything you just said. I can completely sympathize and agree with you that I don't think anybody should just be walking up to a random stranger and going, "Hi, this is Aisha. She suffers from the scourge of, I don't know, halitosis." That would be a weird thing to say. Now, if I walked up to somebody else and they had terrible bad breath, I had terrible bad breath, and you had terrible bad breath, then I might go, "Hey, this is Aisha, man. She's in the club. She can't get rid of it either." And I would assume then you might be like, "Yeah, it sucks. You know anything?" I take your point. Like I said, I completely agree with you. I just wanted to make sure people understood that you wouldn't have been upset if he would have shared something in context.
Right.
Right.
I have in the last couple of years tried to reach out more because I will say, I think, as a kid, I didn't see very many cases of type 1 around me at all, and now it seems like there's so many young families that are experiencing it, and it's a complicated, overwhelming, time-consuming condition to deal with, and a lot of times parents feel at loss. That's why I'm so grateful for your show, for the variety of information that you share with everyone, because I can always take something from almost every show that you've ever done. I'm always like, yep, I understand that. And it really gives community, for people like me who didn't have a community.
This episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, and this is Sarah.
Sports are his life. He was 9 years old. He was just starting to develop his own personality and his own passions and his own independence. And instantly we were afraid that was going to be taken away. It was a very scary time for me. I would say probably the first couple weekends, there was a lot of fear about what happens if I go low. Obviously, now that we're on the Medtronic technology, what we do managing his diabetes during athletics has changed drastically. The Medtronic technology that we are using has almost eliminated the fear I have while my child is playing.
As far as community goes, have you met other people with diabetes? What's some good advice you've gotten from them?
I have met so many people with diabetes. This summer, I had the opportunity to meet others that are using Medtronic technology. And I feel like we have built such a strong connection because we speak the same language. We don't even have to say what we're going through. I have good friends that are Medtronic mamas that I can reach out to that have been incredibly helpful. And then our Medtronic rep has been phenomenal.
To learn more about the Medtronic Champions community and to find helpful resources and tips for caregivers and families, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/parents-caregivers. Well, I'm glad for that. I genuinely, that's my goal. I wanted to say that we're making adjustments to Arden's settings. We're changing a GLP medication slowly, and that's causing us to have to change insulin, slowly, etc. And it's like a process, right? This is taking a few weeks. I was sitting last night I was folding laundry and watching television and thinking about Arden's blood sugar. And then, then eventually I got the laundry done. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to sit down and keep watching this thing on television. But I was still thinking about I think if we move this setting here, or I had a friend of mine say to me, hey, you're using that dynamic setting on Trio and I'm having a lot more luck without it. Maybe you'd want to try it without it. And it was kind of going through all that. And until just now, when you said, I think about this all the time, it didn't hit me. I've been thinking about this for 3 weeks. Not constantly, but daily, at least, and even Art and I recorded yesterday together. We're making these silly little episodes where we just pick something that neither of us understands and we try to figure it out, using conversation, Google and AI. And we're trying to figure these things out. And they, have these dumb little conversations. And so we're recording one yesterday. I think if I can even remember what we spoke about yesterday, money. She's she always says, I don't understand money. And I've never dug into it deeper than that with her. And so we put it on the list and we sat down yesterday and we start talking about it. Turns out it's, not the exchange of goods and services for cash that she doesn't understand. There was a deeper conversation there. We have this whole conversation. It goes really well. We get done. And the last thing I say to her is, hey, you said you're feeling tired. Have you been taking your Cytomel? And she's like, no, because the doctor told me to stop taking it for a little while to see what was happening. I said, well, it sounds like you might be tired. Why don't you re-add it and see how you feel over a couple of days? And she goes, yeah, okay. And I said, and on Saturday, when you do the GLP, how much did you do last time? Let's do this time this much, blah, blah, blah. And oh, by the way, later I'm going to text you about shutting off the dynamics. And then I got off of it. And it all feels so normal that until I stepped out of it just now and had this conversation with you, I wasn't like, Jesus, man, no one else talks about like that. That's not a thing other people talk about. And those other people have a nice hour talking to their kid and they go, I love you, goodbye. And they hang up the phone. They don't talk about Cytomel and the dynamic setting. And you know what I mean? Okay, so how old were you when you were diagnosed?
Let me do the math. I hate doing math and so do you. I think I was 22.
Oh.
At the time.
Aisha, you're in your mid-50s?
Yes. Shush. Yes, I am.
I know what you look like. I wouldn't have guessed that. Sorry. I mean, good for you. But yeah.
Yeah, I am really grateful that, been managing it all these years. And, there's only been, a few bumps in the road, so to speak. And I think that's the thing is that, you can have this really great, amazing life with type 1. And it's, everything goes really well until it doesn't. And I think you just keep learning about, you make so many adjustments all the time with Arden's care. Just you try new things. And I think that's great because it's not one and done anymore.
Yeah. I can't wait till she gets done college. And I'm like, listen, obviously this partnership is probably coming to an end. I hope you've been paying attention because there are a lot of adjustments to make. And especially when you're a woman, honestly, when you have big feet, hormonal swings, it just adds a level of complexity to it.
Oh, and it's funny you mentioned that. I'm sorry. That's funny that you mentioned that because I was writing in my notes. I was back then they'd be when I first, even that was only 30 years ago, but they were oh yeah, no, there's no changes week to week. That's just, you're being silly. It's no, there's changes every week. I'm I'm having to modify. And back then, MDI,
In your life, you're telling me you've been told you were imagining that?
Yeah, basically. I mean, care has not been, not everybody has a Scotton, at home that they can, help with, determining whether or not somebody says something that's kind of off the cuff there like that. And weird.
I'm just imagining 30 years ago, some doctor being oh, that's probably just you. You got the vapors or something. You're just all upset because of your lady time. You don't even know what's happening, silly.
Yeah.
That's got to be, it's just incredibly frustrating because it's happening. And you're hey, I'd like to say something to you about this, doc. And they're you girls. Geez.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There you go. But then even then, back then, your settings were so set. They basically told you 1 injection a day, and it was this amount, and that's it. Don't variate it due to what you're eating or doing or any of that, back then. And carb counting was just coming around the corner at that time.
Yeah.
So,
But whether it's then or now, what needs to be understood deeper is that it's the conversation that's important. Like maybe you were wrong, right? But who cares? Have the conversation, because maybe you're right. And the guy will go, I'm assuming 30 years ago was a guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And like, so maybe you're right. And maybe the doctor goes, you know what? Let me ask all the other women that I see and see what they say. And if you end up being wrong, who can, like, there's no damage saying it out loud. I say things on the podcast that I'm like, look, I saw this thing. I don't know if this is right or not, but like, you go out into your life and try to figure out if it's right or wrong. If it's wrong, and throw it away. If it ends up helping you, then great. I don't understand what's wrong with the conversation. You know what I mean? It's upsetting. Also, I want to go back to for a second.
Sure.
You look like you're in your 40s, like earlier 40s. Yeah. As you may know, I look younger than I am. I'm just going to pivot this for a second because there's no other place for me to tell this story. Okay. Okay. So I'm at the pet store the other day. Oh God, I should just leave these details out because it makes me sound like an 18-year-old, who can't find a friend. But I ran out of crickets from my chameleons, and I had to run out to the pet store because I usually buy them online. They're nicer, they're healthier, they're cheaper. But I had to run. It's not the point. I'm in the line at the pet store, and there's a guy in front of me. He's maybe like 35, and he's with his kid. His kid's like 7, 8 years old. They're buying a little frog and a bag of water and some other supplies for it. And he's clearly out with his dad on a Sunday, like getting a little frog to set up at home, And the woman says, give me your phone number because some of this stuff you bought, she says to the guy, is on sale. And he says his phone number. And she puts it in. She goes, oh, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. Do you have like another phone number with us? And he goes, nah, I guess not. Don't worry about it. And I said, hey, you can just use my phone number to get to save the money. And he looks at me and he goes, thank you, sir. And I was like, sir, like, what the hell? And I was like, all right. Like, a part of me was like, no, now you can't have the phone number. But I gave him the phone number, saves the money, saves a bunch of money. It was nice, handful of dollars. He turns again and he says, like, he's very polite. And he goes, like, I really want to thank you again. I hope you have a good day, sir. And I was like, twice with the sir. And I'm like, okay, so he leaves. Now, the woman behind the counter, who's like, I'm going to say, God, I hope she doesn't hear this. I'm going to say she's like 68. Okay. And she's like, hi, how are you? And I said, well, I was all right till a minute ago when that guy called me sir, and now I feel old. And she goes, oh, I know what you mean, blah, 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 blah. How old are you? She says to me. And I go, I'm 53. And she goes, oh my God. She goes, I know exactly how you feel. I'm 52. And I was like, oh, hell. I was like, oh my God, I thought you were almost 70. And then I felt better. And luckily I didn't say anything that gave that away. But then I felt better. And I came home and I'm like, listen, I don't know if you realize this or not. I don't have a ton to say on Facebook. So like, I share stupid little things that happen in my life on Facebook, and I share this in the group. And what came around and people kind of got me on top of was, did he have an accent? And I thought he did. I actually found myself thinking he might be from Virginia or more south when he was speaking. And people said, oh, he could have been military or like have grown up in the South, where that's just a very common thing to call anybody sir or ma'am. And I was like, oh, that made me feel much better.
I love that they thought of that.
Oh, thank God. Because all I could think was, do I look like I have, like, he's in his 30s, right? Mid 30s, late 30s, somewhere in there. He's got a kid, right? He's a grown man with muscles and, like, you know what I'm saying? He wasn't a boy. Like, how much older did I have to look to him for him to sir me if that was about age? You know what I mean? Flip me out. I did not like it at all.
Well, we get the same with ma'am. Ma'am always kind of,
Swear to God, it might be your dark hair, but like, you look very young.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm very grateful for that. And hopefully it'll continue because you try, like, I don't know, for everybody who's dealing with type 1, I mean, I think we're all working to do the best that we can. And I'm grateful that not just looking good or any of that, because
but that you feel vital.
Really think about that.
Yeah, no. Listen, I gotta be honest with you. I'm not a great looking person. It's not a thing I think about all the time until the guy's standing in front of you going, sir. You're like, sir, what is happening? Seriously, it isn't a thing I think about a lot. But there, when it was happening, I was like, uh-oh. this is sliding off the cliff real quick. But nevertheless, you're trying to be healthy is what you're saying. Like, right? You're just trying to take good care of yourself. Right. Okay.
Right. But actually, going back to your story there, it was funny. You were talking about, I only cry on Mondays. That interview, you were talking about her husband, that he's really good looking husband.
Oh my God. I remember. Yeah.
It's hysterical. Like, we're all laughing along with you. I'm sorry. I keep hitting the desk with my chair. Laughing hysterical because there are times, Scott, where you sound exactly like my brother. Oh. He has the same laugh, the same kind of, and I just sit there and I'm like, oh, that's great. It's nice.
I looked up her profile and I was like, this lady is married to a model. I was like, what's going on? Oh, it was awesome. Like, he's one of those people where if somebody said to you, like, hey, listen, you just have to do a little ceremony and his good looks will transfer to you, I'd be like, I'll think about it. Like, he's just a really handsome guy, Anyway, yeah, that's nice. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
Yeah, it was good. I always love that.
Aisha, the truth is that I look at, like, I hear what you said earlier, that the podcast, in ways the podcast has been helpful for you, right? And I try to keep in mind that if I got on here every day and it was dry content about diabetes and it had that feeling that it had been gone over with a fine tooth comb 1,000 times and every word was perfect and, it was a script that you could give at a hospital, like a speech, right? That people would just be like, I am not listening to this, and I just think instead, like, we'll get on with you and we'll talk. Like, we haven't even, to me, got to what's the most interesting part about you, which is something made you, a person who does not tell people they have diabetes, reach out to me and say, I'd like to come on the podcast and talk about my diabetes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you tell me more about what drove you for that? I mean, it's the glucagon story, but is there more to it than that?
Well, I think too, glucagon is a lot of it because, like I said, about no education about it. And then, I've mentioned a couple of times before, I've been alone 20 years, and in that time, trying to manage everything. And one of the scary things has always been the use of glucagon. We wouldn't use it because we were worried about, like, what the after effects would be. And then I have to tell you, I know it's not one of your sponsors and hopefully someday it will be, but for me, Baqsimi now, so I carry both. I carry Gvoke and Baqsimi.
Interesting.
And one of the reasons is I've had to actually give myself Baqsimi when I knew I couldn't juice box out of something. I had another low, another day. I was standing in my kitchen. I knew it was coming really hard and fast. I was having a really rough low coming on. It was coming on and I could see it coming. And I was like, well, a juice box or 2 or 3 is not going to handle it. So I had my Baqsimi and I said, all right, let's give this a go. And I shot it up my nose. So, you basically put it into one nose, nasal cavity, and you push the button and it goes right up. And that worked beautifully. It not only brought me back to a good sugar level, but I didn't have any side effects. I didn't have anything afterwards where I felt terrible. And when I did that, I was like, dang, if people knew, especially if you live alone, that, you could do this and not feel terrible afterwards. I get frustrated, like with the providers and stuff. It's like, your patients may live alone or they might be alone. Why not encourage them to utilize glucagon in whatever way, they feel comfortable with, but to use it? I think we're all afraid of using it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I have a question. So are you equating using Gvoke in your other story with not feeling well afterward? Because I would equate that with the hours and hours and hours of being low, not Gvoke.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. The hours and hours. I do not agree. I like Gvoke. I still carry it as well.
Yeah.
The reason why I carry the Baqsimi also is that there's so many trainings nowadays on Narcan on how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people have more of a comfort level with just injecting, or not injecting, but, utilizing a nasal rescue drug as opposed to injecting somebody. I think needles are always going to be a concern for people, but Gvoke has a really easy administration. So it's not like the old kit.
You're also in a unique situation. And I want to get back to your story because I have more to add to that, but where you're not telling people around you that you have diabetes even. So they're not going to like just pull it out of your bag and be like, oh, I guess we should jam this in her now. Right. So does that ever concern you that you haven't shared that with other people for that reason?
It's funny, not funny. I had a situation where I was traveling and there was lots of activity, lots of different, our day was not a typical day. And I went to go tell my girlfriends at that point. I was traveling with a bunch of girls and I was like, hey, you see this bag here? I'm like, I was going to tell them what was in the bag because I carry it with me everywhere. They were so excited about where we were that they kind of like dismissed my introduction of the topic and they got excited about something else. And then we went on with our day. And then a couple of days later, I actually did need it. And they realized that they had an opportunity had they listened and let me explain. And again, I should have been more proactive about it. And that is going forward. I have actually sat down with my friends and gone over how to use all of the pieces that I carry with me.
Gotcha. Why do you think you're getting low frequently?
Oh, adrenaline for some things like right now, I'm using a little bit less insulin than usual. A few months ago, it was like water. The settings are pretty much about the same. I don't know. It's just always been my entire 31, 32, whatever years. It's never been predictable.
Are you telling me that your needs change and before you notice they change, you have too much insulin because of settings?
Not necessarily because of settings, but because of life in general. I mean, you know this, like you can get all ready and you go list for something and then your opportunity to eat whatever it was doesn't show up. And here's something new also for you that you might not know. Probably don't know because I haven't told you yet. My meal times used to be incredibly difficult for me. And I started finally introducing Afrezza into my meal times. And that has been amazing as well.
Okay.
It's nice and quick. It comes in like doctor said the other day, it comes in, there's no tail. And that's really the reason where I had so many challenges was that the tail on insulin is so long that
it was getting you then like later after meals.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like with the first story that I told about, it happening overnight, that's that tail that would just hang in there for hours after. I really liked when he was talking about, it was Dr. Belvin, I think.
Blevins.
That had talked about Afrezza.
Yeah, Dr. Blevins.
Oh, Blevins, yep.
Yep, yeah.
He was saying that, insulin has like a 6-hour length on it. And most people don't realize that. They think it has like a 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And there's a couple extra hours.
I definitely think that's true. I think a lot gets commingled where, but people who have pumps that aren't being run by, they're not some sort of an AID system. They don't have an algorithm running. So those people would shorten their insulin action time in their pumps so that they'd get more insulin the next time they bolus or something a couple hours after a meal. It's not a terrible way to handle things. I've certainly had Arden's, and I think of it as a dummy setting almost, the insulin action time on a regular pump, but I've had it set shorter so that she'd get bigger boluses at times. But once you're using, any of these AID systems, I think what you're going to see is that insulin lasts 6 hours in most situations. Yeah. I actually was just looking, I have an email here from somebody about setting up another person to come in and talk about Afrezza. So I'm excited about that. Hopefully that can happen. He's a rep for the company, but he knows like a ton about it. And so I think he's trying to get the okay from the company to come on and speak on the podcast. So hopefully that'll happen because I do hear more people talking about it recently for certain.
I love it. I have to say, I really love it because it can come in, like he said, like within 15 minutes, whatever, it starts acting. And then about 90 minutes to 3 hours, it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's gone. You're not dealing. And I love the fact that he was saying about that you could take another capsule if you didn't cover the food because it would just be gone within 90 minutes. And it gave you a little bit more control over the food. And that was always my biggest, if I don't eat, I'm fine. My settings are great.
Yeah.
But as soon as I introduce food, it's always been a challenge.
You think you don't think you can go your whole life without eating?
I've tried. I really have.
I guess you could, but it would be a shorter life, right?
Yeah, it would be, I'd miss out on so many yummy things out there. Life is full of good stuff. And
I'm just imagining you come on here and say, so I haven't been eating for 2 months. My blood sugars have been really terrific. I think I've got a couple more months left, but then, anyway, I'm going out with a bang with these great, steady, stable blood sugars.
Oh, so funny.
Cool. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, it's hard to argue when you hear people talk about it, like the way they're on top of big meals, that they don't get low afterwards. They don't have to be concerned about it. Like, it's great. This is a weird question, and I could be barking up a completely wrong tree, but I'm going to see if there's a connection here. If there's not, you'll tell me there isn't.
Okay.
You don't like telling people about your diabetes.
Right.
And earlier you said, I've been sleeping alone for 20 years.
Yeah.
Are those two things connected?
Oh, no.
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 Okay. All right. That's all. I just didn't know if you had trouble forming like personal relationships because of diabetes.
No. I mean, in my past relationships, I've shared with the person I was dating about, type 1. And usually it's like, when you get in, I'm not one of those people who like right from the first day lays it all out on the line and says, hey, this is my whole life.
Where do you think we should go to lunch? This is my glucagon. Uh-oh. No, not like that.
Here you go.
Yeah,
Keep it handy.
Right. Listen, buddy.
Well, it is interesting what people will say at the very beginning of a first date. Sometimes they just lay it all out there.
Wait a minute. What's the best story that somebody's hit you with on a first date?
Oh my gosh. No, I think it was funny. I went on a walking date one day and, we meet somebody to go for a walk, get to know each other. Literally, within the first 5 seconds, he already was saying, look, I had a vasectomy. I can't have kids. So if you want kids, we might as well call it quits now.
How old were you when this happened? I need to know.
Oh my gosh. I think I was probably 40.
Yeah. Were you thinking about kids when you were 40, by the way?
I don't know if I was even thinking. I barely had time to think about whether or not I locked my car in the parking lot before I met this person, It's hysterical. Dating is fun.
How quickly do you make sounds coarse, but it's not. But how quickly after meeting a man till you know if you would have sex with him or not? Does it happen fast or does it take time?
You asked me that question. Well, whether or not I want to have sex with them or not is, that's kind of like based on sexuality. Like, I might want it, but I'm not going to.
Oh, I'm not saying you would. No. I'm not saying you would. I'm saying when's the moment when the light goes off and you go, ooh, I'm not doing this, or I would.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh.
I don't think I kept track of that. I think it's let's put it this way. That one was within the first 30 seconds right there.
You were like, no, thank you.
Not because he didn't want to have kids, but it was just like, I didn't even much know his last name at that point, you know? And,
yeah. And he's, I hear what you're saying. That's probably not a first date comment. I don't think. It must be so hard to date when you've got all that baggage, you're like, I got to let him know and blah, blah, blah. And it's probably been a pressure for him in his life in the past. He probably met somebody, fell in love with them. And then 6 months into it, they were like, I like you. I can't wait to have kids. And he's like, which, you know what I mean? Like maybe, I don't know, but I get, it's ridiculous. I hope.
I thought it was funny. But.
Yeah. But you also kind of like, you dinged him on points there too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly. But I did finish the walk.
Oh, I finished the walk. You were like, I can burn 350 calories here if I just stay.
Exactly. Get my steps in.
I already did a temp basal decrease for this. I got to go on this walk.
See? Like when you commit to it, it's going to mess up if you don't do,
I'm either walking or whatever. I got to do a jumping jack when I get back to my car.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's ridiculous. What's it like dating with type 1 in general? Like, has it impeded it or have you had good experiences? Have you had all kinds?
I think I've chosen wisely, so to speak. The gentleman that I have dated in the past, it does come up at a point that when there's a trust factor, if I'm going to be spending time with somebody and I trust them with my time, I'll probably see how they're going to handle it.
Mhm.
Some people were like, oh, no problem at all. Like it was nothing. And then others were a little, not too crazy about it. And some just are better. Other people that have, thinking of one of my girlfriends, she was like, when I told her, she was like, okay, anything I need to know? She was like, okay. Like she didn't have any questions. So I think some people are incredibly inquisitive and then others just don't know what to ask.
Have you seen any similarities between people who have responded poorly? Like, is there like a trait about them that you've noticed throughout or no?
Not enough to pick them out, I guess. No, that's a good point.
Yeah, I was just wondering if something popped into your head. Like, oh, wow, these guys all seem like, whatever.
I don't think there was too much of a commonality with that, but that's a good thing I'll put that on my radar for the next one to see.
Yeah, I just wondering. That goes. Yeah, like they all have brown hair or something. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah, that could be the trait. No.
I don't. Yeah, obviously don't mean anything that simple, but yeah, I wasn't certain. I've heard some stories, like both online and on the podcast, and there's one recently. It was online where the person was like, the guy came at her and was just like, I can't believe you want me to like build a life with you when you're sick or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, like Jesus. Take the time to understand, first of all. Then once you understand, if it seems like it's too much for you, it's too much for you. That, like you say, I don't think I can handle this. Like, not there's something wrong with you. And so I got to go now. Like, I mean, I guess you catch a break when you realize that that's the person you're with. You know what I mean? But still, terrible way to say something to somebody.
I mean, the world is full of different people, and some of them get it, and some of them don't. And
well, that's for sure.
Just gotta choose well. Just gotta keep choosing well,
Okay, so tell me, you called yourself like a closeted type 1 in your note.
Yes, I did.
Okay, is that ever going to change? Do you think?
I don't know. I think that's why I wanted to do this today too. Was I've spent 32 years not talking about it, I think maybe. I don't know that it would necessarily, not like I'm going to wear a banner or wear a hat or, be walking around with a big arrow on my head or something that says, hey, coming out, here I am, type 1.
Is there a hat? I didn't know there was a hat.
I don't know. We should get one, right? But it's, what it is that I just don't want people to see. And again, it just keeps happening everywhere I go that like, that's all people see. And they don't realize that, yes, I can jump out of an airplane, and yes, I can ride a motorcycle, and I can do so many things that, and yes, at times I'm also thinking about all the things I have to do to keep myself in a good spot to be able to do those things.
Okay.
I think the thing that gets me most frustrated is that we so want to come out to the world, and have this really great environment for all type 1s to be able to live their fullest life. But the reality of it is, and I don't mean true reality, but it's going to take a long time for people to change and for workplaces to change. I don't want anyone to limit me about what I can do. And I think that's the thing that frustrates me and concerns me the most, is that someone's going to say, oh, you can't do this.
Yeah. Is this cultural? Is this about where you live to some degree or no?
I don't think so.
Okay. Have you lived in different areas?
I did move bunches of places growing up. So that could be some of it, is that I was the new kid many a time. But I don't think it's really environment.
It's not like you're somewhere where they're like, you got the sugars and it just is what it is. Like you're not like, because I've heard people talk like that. Like, oh, you got the sugars, bad luck on you.
Right.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and you know what, when I was telling you in the early days, when I was open about it, and, people would make some terrible errors in judgment on how to, think about me or treat me. I had a fellow person at my church where I went that was also type 1, but was a closet type 1. And they kind of took me aside and they said, you really don't want to be telling anyone about this because that's all they're going to see. It's really better just to keep quiet to yourself. And at that point, this is at the same time that everything else was happening. So it kind of like,
Felt like a lot.
I gave weight to what they were saying because life was easier afterwards,
It's funny though, but listen, I'm not in your position. And obviously I think you should do whatever makes you comfortable and happy. But then I also think that it's such an easy way to weed out assholes. You know what I mean? Maybe you don't have to get to know somebody for 6 months before you realize they want to have a baby and you've already had what do? They snip the little vas deferens there or something like that, right? Wait, is that right? Or am I just making up penis parts now? Hold on a second. That's right, isn't it? Oh God, how do I know?
I was going to say tubes tied. Is that what you were thinking?
That's a girl.
About for the guys.
Yeah. How do you clip a man? You think it'll come up with an answer? Nope, I don't mean his hair. Hold on a second.
Okay.
So
does it say I again?
Can't have a baby. Also, I know men can't have baby. I think it's clear. Yes, vasectomy is a highly effective preventative. Yeah, if you were asking somebody else. Yeah, no, that's it. How do they do it? It's. I know it's just going to end up saying vas deferens, and I'm going to be like, I know it.
It sounds right.
Incision. The doctor makes 1 or 2 small cuts on the scrotum to access the vas deferens. Woo! Look at me paying attention to 8th grade biology. The vas deferens on each side is cut. A small section is removed. The ends are then sealed by tying them off. This is also how they get rid of an old sink in your basement. They just cut the pipes and cap them off, and then you're on your way. But anyway, like
terrible analogy.
I don't know. Listen, I'm doing my best over here.
I know.
So you've got this it's almost like a built-in bullshit detector. And then you get to say something and people say something crazy and you go, okay, well, not them. But at the same time, I am taking your point very seriously about it's just a lot of pressure always having people tell you, give me that cake. You can't do that. Are you sure? All that crap that comes with it has got to be overwhelming. So I see both sides of the argument, actually.
Yeah. And I think there's benefits in both sides. I mean, it's great when you're in a community where everybody knows and, but and I have one friend, I love her dearly, but she knows and she always is looking at me like, are you okay? Are you okay? Do you need to eat? And I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's freaking her out. Yeah. Arden had this girl when she was a little kid. She was in 2nd and 3rd grade. There was this girl she was around. And she came to us as a 2nd grader and said, you have to stop this girl in my class. She's babying me because of the diabetes. And then that went on through the end of 2nd grade. We couldn't get it to stop. It would happen into 3rd grade. And finally we had to be more forceful about it. But yes, she was just treating Arden like a baby because of it. It's got to be even more maddening when you're an adult, I would imagine.
Well, and it's, you love the concern. You love that they're looking out for you. But at the same time, it's not every time I sneeze or every time I, hiccup, my sugar's going up or down, I mean.
Aisha's dying. Someone do something. No, I sneezed. Everything's fine. Thank you. Oh, I take your point. All right. What have we not talked about that we should have?
One of the things I was thinking about was that what I love, again, about your show is that there are variables in diabetes and the variables in the people who are managing diabetes, because we're not just one size fits all. You bring so much content to us all so that we can, and it's hard to keep up with your content, not for nothing.
Thank you.
I used to have to drive up and down the East Coast just to listen to everything and keep up with it.
Are you saying, wait a minute, are you saying it's possible I'm the reason for this bad air quality? What's going on? People are just driving around listening. Go ahead, keep talking. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No. I'm laughing because that's fun. But I did. I went down in 2019 because that was such a pivotal year. You think about it for everybody. But 2019, I was going down to Florida. So I went up and down the coast and I finally got to get caught up. That was the first year I had started listening to you and I got caught up. And then we had the pandemic. So that put a little cut my driving short for a little bit. Mm-hmm. I just had another road trip recently and I got a little more caught up, but you're hard to keep up with.
My idea is kind of wrapped around what you just said, and it made me feel good the way you spoke about it, because I just think that everything can't be for everybody. And if you put out an episode a week, and that episode this week is about like, I don't know, the Miss Iowa, right? Then everybody that looks at it and goes, I don't like the pageant system. Now they don't listen, right? And what if in the middle of it, Miss Iowa says something that's awesome? And by the way, if you noticed, if you heard that one, because I'm thinking of it because it's recent, that girl was really on point. Like she was really just great to talk to. So if the next one is, it just says glucagon, you're like, I don't know what that is, or I don't care, or I don't need that. You don't listen. But if it's you and you just come on and tell your story, then maybe people will hear and go, oh yeah, I should be carrying glucagon. Because I'm going to tell you something. I just left Arden at a different college. And previous to this, she'd been in a setting where she had her own bedroom, but there were people in the apartment and they could come and go out of each other's bedrooms if need be. All those people knew how to use her glucagon. She gets to a new setting where she's in an apartment with 3 people, but everyone's bedrooms automatically lock when they close the door.
Oh, wow.
And the last thing I said to Arden before I left was, Gvoke HypoPen next to the bed, in your purse, it's with you constantly. She goes, I always have it with me. I'm like, I know, but constantly. I said, I know you always have it with you, but next to the bed as well. I want a different one next to the bed. And you don't have to be having a seizure to use it.
Right.
Okay. Like, I'm like, I said, if you get into that spot, like you just described, like, you know, I'm in the kitchen. Actually, you said, I knew it was coming and I knew I couldn't stop it. What told you that? Like, what was your experience that made you feel like, this isn't being stopped by a box of juice?
I think it was just the numbers that I saw on the CGM for one. They were just going down at a double arrow down kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the way you feel, a lot of times, you know, we all experience hypo in different ways, like through our vision, or we feel nervous or itchy or whatever. But it was just, yeah, I knew. And like I said, the same thing for Arden would be like, the good thing is that you know it works and you know that it's not going to make you feel like crap after.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, it's okay to do it.
Yeah. So you're having that moment like in a movie when someone's like going to get hit by a train and they don't even bother trying to move because they know I can't get out of the way of that.
Yeah.
So you're like, it's happening. Boom. I'm going to hit myself, use the back semi, right? Bang. I know this is happening. And that's what I tried to tell her. I was like, look, I'm not saying just run around and if you drift under 70 and, you know, you start feeling dizzy at some point, like that's not the time probably. If it's crashing, if you're just like, I can't get ahead of this, if you're disoriented, if anything happens like that, just do it. And she was like, okay, like, I don't know how it's going to work out, but I wanted her to have that knowledge. I also have had the experience I've talked about on the show before, speaking in front of a room of maybe 400 people and bringing up glucagon and watching most of them just go, I don't even know what you're talking about. So my bigger point is that if I just make an episode that's called glucagon and why it's so darn important, and then have some like buttoned up doctor come on and then read through the bullet points of why glucagon's just so darn important. Let me tell you what I know for sure, because I make a popular podcast. No one will listen to it. No one.
Right.
Okay. They'll skip it. Or if they click on it the first time that, you know, the first 30 seconds when the doctor's like, you know, I don't know, it sounds like they're reading from a textbook. They're done. They'll just shut it off. And so, you know, that to me, like, you put out a lot of content, you cover a lot of things, you mix conversation with information so that people will make it to it. Just do your best to put it out there as best you can. And, you know, and hope it finds the people that can find it valuable. And if you should say something that's not valuable, listen, I believe in adults. Okay. I believe an adult can listen to something and say, I don't even think that's right. Or that's not for me. Or I know what he's talking about, but I would do it like this. Like, no one's under, I had people in the past say, well, I don't do it exactly the way you do it, but the podcast does help me. And I always think, do you think I'm under the impression that you're like following this like a roadmap? Like, that's interesting. You know what I mean? So I'm just talking like, here's my experiences. Like, you know, I found some other people. Here's their experiences. Do what you want with it. You know what I mean? Like, you're an adult. You can figure it out. That's all. But I appreciate that.
No, I think that's good.
Yeah. You're like, why are you talking like this? Because you don't know my life.
Well, we hear a lot of it through the podcast, but something else I just thought of too that was interesting when I was getting ready. I was like, we spent 2 hours with our doctor a year, 2 hours. And we spend 8,758 hours managing type 1.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
yeah,
the 30-second time that they spend looking at your stuff is like nothing compared to, so like, again, your content really does sometimes, a doctor's never going to go into all the details of explaining why, it's important to carry glucagon or why it's important to administer it to yourself.
Yeah. I had a person tell me recently, like, Scott, even if you were wrong every, I don't know, once out of every 5 times you opened your mouth, he goes, you're still doing way better than the doctors I've had my entire life. And I was like, thank you. It feels like if you'd never seen professional hockey before, and I was like, can you skate? And you were like, I can stand on skates and move a little bit. I was like, that's great. Come here. And then I pulled you aside, handed you a stick, put a helmet on your head and said, that's the Philadelphia Flyers and the Montreal Canadiens, and they need help. Puck, hit it into the net. You're on that side. And then I shoved you out on the ice. I think that's what it feels like to have diabetes. You know what I mean? For a great many people, like you just said, like there's so much information you need, but you get a tiny little percentage of what you actually need. And then you just throw into the lions and like, just go do it now. And, you're going to get out there. You're going to pick your head up. Some guy named Claude is going to skate right through. It's going to knock you on your ass. And you're going to be like, I thought I just had to skate towards the black thing and hit it. It's not enough information and time.
Yeah.
Even if doctors had, even if they had a way to give you all the information in a way that you would jive with. And by the way, some people don't like to read. Some people don't like to talk. Like everybody learns in a different way on top of everything else. But let's just say your doctor's got all the info. They know how to talk to you. They still don't have the time, and you don't have the time while you're with them. And what the podcast allows you to do is to pop it on when it's convenient for you. And when you're kind of emotionally ready for it, and when you have enough, I would think, like intellectual space to accept this new information and try to think about it. That's all. I mean, it's an imperfect system, but so far, I don't see a better way to do it. And if there is, I think somebody should go, if somebody listening right now is like, Scott, a podcast is a terrible way to do this. I know a better way. I think you should be doing it. Go do it right now. You know what I mean? Go help people. So anyway, good. Well, you were going to say something. I talked over you. I apologize.
I was going to say, I really do, not just that I like the podcast, but I like the fact that, you have them, diabetes variables and the bold beginnings. And, we can go back and listen to them over and over. And it's kind of like what we do to refine how we take care of ourselves is to go back and say, okay, what did I miss the first time? Or, oh yeah, now this is, second nature to me. And I know to do this, that, and the other thing. And, how about adding this into it now? Because we can only do so much you can only do so much each time you try something new. You can only do what you can do.
Right. I'll tell you, it's going to sound odd maybe, but I have a huge amount of respect for all the sponsors for sponsoring the podcast too, because you just brought up some series, right? Those series are ideas, and then they're thought about for a year. And then, you think, okay, I think this is the pacing for it. I think these are the topics we'll want to hit. Who would I want to talk to about that? Where would that work best? When can we get that scheduled? Et cetera, and so on. And then by the time it comes out, it's been in my head for a couple of years before that happens. Or up on this I'm looking at a whiteboard right now that has two series, well, 3, but 2 series on it there's 4. I have 4 series ideas in front of me, right? And 2 of them are getting closer. Let me start over. There are 5 series ideas in front of me on this whiteboard. One of them I've just started doing. It took me maybe a year to get it rolling. The other 2 are getting closer, and there's 2 more that I bet I don't do until 2026. No kidding.
Awesome.
Right?
Awesome.
And I know how they fit into the bigger conversation, but the bigger conversation has to happen before you put them in. And that takes time, and it takes a lot of effort. And I'm telling you that without all that, without the support of the sponsors, if this isn't my job, this is my notebook where I go, oh, wouldn't it be nice to do this? And that never happens, because if it's not your job, you can't put enough time into it. It takes an immense amount of time just to get it as far as I've been able to get it. And if you wanted it to be even more, you'd say, oh, well, if we hired a staff, I can't afford to do that. But let's say I could afford to hire a staff. Then what would turn into it is 7 people's opinions. And one people would be like, you can't say that. And one person, and it'd be like a paralysis by analysis situation. It would just sit perfectly still. It would never happen. And instead, I think just think it through, get it straight as best as I can, put it out. Hopefully people get something out of it and keep going and make more. And to your point about there being so much, I got to be honest with you. Like, I probably would like to make a little less than I make. At the moment, I'm going to use the word scourge twice in one episode. Once was as a joke, but this at the moment is the scourge of social media. Like, if I take my foot off the gas, you can't get back in the game again. It's like a NASCAR race. Like, you drop out of the top 5, you're done. And that's just what happens. So anyway, I put out a lot of content so that people always have something there if they want it. That's pretty much the whole thing. I appreciate that you like it.
Well, I think it's great content. That's the thing, like you were saying about your planning board. And I'm kind of like a planner by nature, and things don't happen overnight. You don't come up with a series just, oh, okay, let's go shoot it now and get it up on air next week. There's a lot of that goes on behind the scenes about it. And I love that you're thinking about that so that it's not just stagnant content. You're branching out in ways that is not the same old with diabetes education.
There are some people who put out like some of the, like, from what I understand, some of the most coherent, like 20-minute videos that explain things to you, right? Like, and explain to you how a system works or something like that. And I've heard from people, like, they'll tell me all the time, like, you should listen to that. It's so good. And I'm like, I don't have time to listen to anything, but that's not neither here nor there. What I'm saying is that people I trust say the content's good, right? And they'll send me a link and I look and I go, I never get to it. But you look and you're like, this has been downloaded 200 times, or it's been up for 3 years and it's been listened to 800 times. I'm like, there are 185 million people with type 1 diabetes. Like, they found a way to get it to 400 people. It's statistically, it helps the 400 people, but you're not spreading the word about this thing that you think is very important. It has to be, I don't know. Like, I don't know why I know what's entertaining. Okay. But I do. And for a great many people, like I cross boundaries that are gender, race, country, religion. Like, I have a mix of all of different kinds of people listening, and not everybody listen. Some people hate me. Some people tolerate me, like, whatever, who cares? As long as they're getting something out of it. I think about all the GLP content that's gone up in the last year. Like, if you think that like 12 months ago, I was like, GLP's popular, I'll make GLP content. The word GLP explainer has been on my board for 3 years. 3 years. It's been up there. GLP explainer. I'm looking at it right now. I didn't even know what that meant when I wrote it down. I just thought, I think people need to know what GLPs are. GLP explainer. And then time moves on and it gets a little more out into the world. And you're like, all right, I'm seeing people using it now. Let's get some doctors on, find out what they think, pay attention on the back end to what you're seeing. Then start seeing people like popping up. And now somebody came to me the other day and said, there are so many people popping up in the Facebook group who are type 1 and using GLPs. They're really like coming out now about it. They're not like, I just started. A lot of people are like, oh, I've been doing that for 2 years, or I've been doing that, or I took the pill for 5 years and I just went to the, but so what you're doing is, what I think I'm doing is creating a situation where people can feel like it's okay for me to talk about this. I've been taking Rybelsus since it came out or whatever. I just moved to Mounjaro and here's my, like, it's okay to tell people about that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I know, like, when I have that guy on who's Lada and suddenly isn't using any insulin, right? And I'm like, oh God, there's going to be a small portion of people that are just going to hate that this happened, that he said this out loud. But I think bigger picture, it's important for people to hear. I think people can figure out that GLP medication doesn't magically make your insulin needs go away. This guy's having a very unique experience, but it's worth looking into. You know what I mean?
I'm going to throw something at you here because I started on it 10 days ago. And I have to tell you, my time and range it's beautiful. I have not been able, like my normal average BG was getting higher and higher. So like this last year, like everything was getting more challenging to deal with. Okay. And finally, we were able to start Wegovy like 10 days ago, but literally like just being able to see the stability and not, like, it just, I don't know how it does it. Really, I mean, I've listened to all your podcasts and I've listened to the other podcasts that you've had that have talked more about it in detail, but it's just amazing what it can do.
So you've had 0.25 Wegovy 2 times so far.
Yes.
You see, where my brain goes to for you is, if this lowers your insulin needs, maybe you're not going to have so many lows in the future. And wouldn't that be terrific?
Well, right. Exactly. Well, and that's exactly it, is that it's reduced the highs and the lows. And it's just like, the numbers are amazing. I just ran my report and I was like, I was getting frustrated because my numbers were pushing up, and I'm on loop and I have a CGM and I do everything. I put in exercise ratio when I'm going to exercise, and I have Afrezza. I have all these tools available, and no matter what, it wasn't working. And I fought for like about a year to get onto Wegovy, and I finally just got it. And literally, like overnight, like my average BG is like 111, 106, which I had never seen that. My biggest difficulty was standard deviation. I know you've talked about that in the past, but it's like, that was a hard one for me. They wanted to be below 40. I barely get it below 50 when I was trying,
Yeah. And now this one little thing is going to make such a big difference. How did you get Wegovy? Did you qualify on BMI?
I did. So I have been fighting with my weight for a while. Originally, my doctor filled out the paperwork incorrectly. So it looked like I hadn't lost any weight on it, but I hadn't even started it. We went back around another year later and we put it in again. And this time she filled it out correctly. And somehow it went through. And I don't know if it's due to BMI. I'm only 5 foot, so it doesn't take much
to push your BMI.
Yeah,
I hear you. Yeah, okay. Oh, listen, that's awesome. I'm seeing people getting it through some really good insurance policies are starting to cover it for just like dual diagnosis. Like people are like, look, I have type 1 diabetes, but I also have insulin resistance. You can call that whatever you want in your little code. They're going to call it type 2 diabetes, but I have insulin resistance. My doctor says I do. I take this stuff, my need for insulin goes down. And people are getting it covered that way. I can imagine that you're going to need some more FDA, approvals, obviously, but all these other little things that I think people are seeing help with when their inflammation is lowering and they're using these GLPs. I mean, one day you'll probably see it, you'll probably be able to, I'm guessing, prescribe it for PCOS, for example, so like, wait and see, it's awesome, right? I mean, you heard that one person's story, but you heard the lady come on and talk about her kid, like bipolar symptoms going down on a GLP medication. Like, Jesus,
yeah. There's so much. I think there's more to it than, it's not just about the weight, and it's not just about, but I mean, if you think about it, if your sugars are in control and your body's not spending energy on trying to maintain its equilibrium, it's able to put energy elsewhere. So I don't know all about the GLPs, like all the magic of it all, but there is something there that definitely has made a difference already. Just, just in keeping it stable.
Listen, I listen to people, but I don't know. You've listened for a while. I'm not a genius. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but what I know what I see. I'm fairly confident telling you that, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to see this stuff used for a lot of different stuff, and good. And somebody's got to be out ahead of this saying, I think we should look at this. And I think that's what I'm doing. I'm just like, look, here's people's stories. Like, pay attention. You know what I mean? Because this lady's talked about it helping with her kids bipolar, and this person talked about it helping with their RA, and this person talked about it helping with their PCOS. And a lot of people are talking about them helping with their insulin resistance. And now they're using less insulin and they're having fewer lows because of that and fewer excursions after food. And the weight loss, the lady I talked to yesterday, I think she lost 70 pounds. You're like, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like, changed her life. I've lost almost 50 pounds. It's changed my life. It changed my digestion. My digestion allows me now to absorb iron. I used to have to get iron infusions. I don't have to get iron infusions anymore. Like, let people find out what is, and then we'll all work it out together. Like, I'm not going to, if you wait for a pharma company to say, oh, it helps with PCOS, they're not going to say that. They're going to say, oh, there's no money there for that. Like, you need people to say, right, this is what's happening for me. And so that the companies almost get pushed into going like, all right, I mean, if it's helping people, maybe we should run a study and figure it out. And, maybe get some FDA approval and learn how to dose it better. And, everything else that'll come with it. I don't mind being on the edge of the wave sometimes. Like, it's not comfortable because people come at you. They're like, they're more comfortable with what was. I've taken it for, like, it seems silly now, but people have treated me like garbage for saying that people should think about pre-bolusing. Like, I used to get crushed. I used to get crushed for that, right? And then I said, I don't care, how you eat. I just want you to understand how to use insulin. And I got crushed by that, like for fringe, like some kind of more fringe eating styles, or, call me an insulin pusher. I'm like, I'm just saying, like, learn how much insulin you need and use it. And then, you say that for a couple of years and that stops becoming a thing people argue about. And there's other things in there too. Like, you're not specific enough. When you talk, you should be more clear about the blah, blah. It's a podcast. And now I got hit really hard last year for the Grand Round series. Don't tell, I don't like the way you're talking to doctors. Then I put out the Cold Wind series. Don't let people talk about what they see at their jobs. I'm like, oh my God, like, you guys are all so scared of everything. Then the GLP comes out. GLPs aren't for people with type 1, Scott. You're an idiot. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep doing what I think is right. And you don't have to listen. But we need to keep knowing what's going on. And then we can all decide on our own. Like, I don't need a person. Like, you made the point earlier. There are all kinds of different people with diabetes handling it all kinds of different ways. I'm not making a podcast for one of those people. It's for everybody. You don't like it, don't listen to it. But if it's helping you, great. Like, I'm glad. Thank you. I appreciate you listening. You know what I mean? Like, I'm glad it's helping you. Like, live long and prosper, whatever. Aisha, I really just appreciate this. Thank you. I mean, just a terrific conversation. And I talked a little too much today, but I appreciate you being okay with that.
Well, thank you for having me on and, allowing me to share.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It really is. It's a pleasure every time somebody comes on and is kind enough to open up like this. And especially somebody like you who's not accustomed to talking about this with other people. So you went from not telling anybody to telling a lot of people all at once. So
telling the whole world. It's amazing.
Pretty brave. What do you want to call this episode?
I don't know. We didn't talk about too many things. I think it was funny. So I do pet sitting on the side too. I do a lot of things. I do line dancing. I do pet sitting. And right now I'm pet sitting the Breakfast Club. And I was laughing about that this morning, but it's not really relevant to
You're
any
pet
of this.
sitting the Hey, is there a line dance song that's really popular?
Oh my gosh. There's at the bar, that's like and then there's Shivers. There's all kinds of dances out there.
I need you to say one of them so we can make it the title, though. You know what I'm saying?
I know. Now you put me on the spot. I do terrible on game shows, so I will tell you that.
All right, I'm going to get a list of line dance songs. Boot, Scootin' Boogie, Achy Breaky Heart, Copperhead Road, Watermelon Crawl, Good Time, Country Girl, Cha-Cha Slide. Oh, these are more pop rock. Wobble.
Trust Fall.
Trust Fall?
Trust Fall.
Oh, because
yeah,
all right.
That's a good one. Trust Fall.
Is it possible that that's been an episode already? I'll double check this for you now.
It could be. I think it was. Now that I think about it.
Let's find out. Hold on a second. Trust Issues. Trust Will Happen. Helmsley Charitable Trust. You are clear. Trust Fall it is. Congratulations.
Excellent. I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hold on one second. Sarah's story so genuinely encapsulates the experiences that so many caregivers go through on a daily basis. Our Juicebox community knows the importance of caregiver support so intimately, and Sarah's story is just a great example of what caregivers go through on a daily basis. To learn more about the Medtronic Champion community and to find helpful resources and tips for caregivers and families, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/parents-caregivers. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Thinking about getting an algorithm pump? Don't know where to begin? Juiceboxpodcast.com. Up in the menu, click on algorithm pumping, and you're going to get a long list of a lot of episodes that will help you to understand better. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Find algorithm pumping. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.